I also wanted a traditional looking picnic hamper, and so I've got this nice old basket, and it's a traditional hamper, but clearly it needs a lid, and you know, it needs a way of fixing it to the back of Chitty. So I'm going to go ahead and build myself a nice little rack out of brass and aluminium, and then I'm going to come up with some sort of fixing points where as this can fix on nice and easily. I've got a couple of Marks and Spencer's belts and leather belts, which you're going to use for the straps to hold it on. And I've started to think actually it needs to be a bit weatherproofed, and it also has to be quite sturdy, because these are quite sturdy, but if it's going to be on the back of the car, well, pretty much all the time, it needs to be durable and weatherproof. So we have a couple of brackets here that I've just knocked up. It's made out of quite thick aluminium angle, and they're going to sit on the back, obviously a bit further apart. And then on the other bench I've managed to acquire, for a friend, bless him, handy, a couple of quite a few stair rods, but I'd like to use them, nice brass ones, to form some form of rack. So far we've filed out the shape, and I've drilled some pretty 10mm holes, and now I'm going to hacksaw down the sides to make them into U-shape and file them out. A bit of deliberating over how many bolts I should put into this little plate down here, because this is going to bolt on top of the already picnic hamper in situ at the back of Chitty. Little bit that little brass, apart from an old letterbox actually, but you know, it sits on the top there, and I want to drill down through this, straight down through the side, and I want to tap a thread in there. So as you go down and you cut the thread, it eats into this material here, like there. So obviously the drill hole is narrower, but as you cut the thread, it bites into this bit here, so that you can tap a nice hole and put a nice secure bolt in there. This is the part where you have to be really patient and make sure it's really square. So I'm looking from this side to make sure it's up and down nice and square, and also from the front and back to make it nice and square. And as you turn it around gently, just bring it back a little bit, and it's very easy. And then you can feel it bite again, and obviously it's putting material in there. So if you just bring it back a little bit, and then it sort of frees the material, and then you can just go around. You can't just keep going round and round and round. It's probably not the best idea, but if you just work it nicely and push down gently. Here comes the cat. Yeah, quite pleased with that. Oh, come on then, Teddy. Come and have a look what we're doing. Here we go. Look. Well, that looks like a pretty successful thread in there. Seems to be running quite smoothly. Now, I haven't done this many times, and you know, it always seems to be a bit of a hit and miss affair, and I'm sure there's a proper technique of doing this, but this one's always worked for me. Just taking it nice and easy, a little bit forwards and backwards, a little bit of oil, and just a bit of patience really. But anyway, that seems to be. This is the basket, but clearly it needs some form of lid, and having a little look inside, we need to really strip that out and make it a little bit more suitable. But the basket itself is exactly what I want, and I need to make a top for it, so I've got a little bit of ply here and a few plans about it. So the story so far with Chitty's wicker picnic hamper. So these are pretty sturdy, but I've decided to put a base in out of plywood and give it a little bit of extra strength. And I'm also going to, as you can see over this side, do some plywood sides So I've actually stained the timber slightly and put a couple of coats of varnish on there. Now, without getting carried away too much, I've decided to do a base inside the hamper, so give it a little bit of a luxury feel. I've got a nice little bit of red velvet there, and I'm going to make it button backed. So this is going to be the lid of my picnic hamper for Chitty, and so I've just put the lid down and put the sides, which I've already cut to size, sanded down nicely, and now I've just used some PVA glue to actually pull it all together, and so hopefully in about 10 minutes it will have dried suitably where I can put some little tacks in there. I don't want to put screws because I'm going to put screws with over the top later on with some more wood finish, a bit like the boat tail, so I'm going to screw through that. So I want to have some small tacks in here just to hold it in place before I screw the next layer on, but I'll show you what I'm doing. So as you can see, it's got a lid, and it's got the surrounds that I've obviously had to sand. Well, I actually sawed it first of all into a nice little shape that will take the picnic hamper nicely. What I should have done is being a bit sensible here, is actually put a bit of newspaper between the bench that I'm using, so it's a garden bench. And the reason I wanted to put a bit of newspaper there is so that when the glue over spills, you don't stick the lid to the bench, which is quite likely, and it's pretty. Now I'm going to use a nice Iroko timber. It's sort of like I don't know, I've been told it's like a teak substitute, but I don't know. I don't know enough about timber, but it's a nice timber used in the boat building industry. The wood that I've used to hold it down with a clamp has got a bit of cardboard between it, because the last thing I want to do is glue the wood to the wood, because you're never going to get that off. So I've just drilled the holes to take the brass screws, and they're 2 centimeters long, so they've gone down 2 centimeters. And to make sure that I'm using the right drill bit, I'm sure there's a proper way of doing this, and the right size for the drill bit, but I tend to take the brass screw and I put it beyond the and hold it up to the light, and if I can see the thread either side of the drill bit, then I know that it's going to dig a decent hole, drill a decent hole, and there's still be plenty of thread to hold it in nice and tight. So I hold it up against the light with the drill bit in front of it, and if I can see the thread, then I know it's going to hold. So that's always worked for me, and you have to be really careful with brass, because if you turn it too tightly, it will just shear. So it's really important to have quite a decent sized hole, but still. Now I've drilled in, or drilled down 2 centimeters, which is the length of the screw, so that should go in quite nicely. And I've countersunk the top, so it should sit quite flush. And as I bring it down, keeping it nice and even, it's really important to me, it may not be to you, but it's like having a little bit of attention to detail. And when you get the last bit in, it's really, that's another turn, I think, one more turn, and it's really important to get them all lined up perfectly so they're running, all the heads are running left to right. I've managed to cork every slat down there, but it's really important to actually varnish it first, because if you don't varnish it first and then you try and put the sealant on, the sealant will go into the grain, and when you wipe it off you just never get it away, and it will be embedded in the grain. It'll be a nightmare. But if you varnish it first, put a few coats of varnish on, and then when you cork it, you can just wipe it off with a cloth and it comes off nice and smoothly. Now, just for a bit of fun, I've decided to make myself it's like a dial really. It's an old valve gauge from a ship. So I thought this could actually mount on the top of the picnic hamper. Just bring it a little bit closer, and you can see that what I've decided to do is we've got breakfast, 9 o'clockers, tea break, 11s, lunchtime clearly, afternoon tea, 4 o'clockers, dinner, supper and wine time. So I'm going to dismantle this old tea light stand, and all the little brass bits that I pulled together off an old tea light, and they're going to work out as some kind of mechanism to hold the hamper onto the rack. Little brackets that I've made, well this is one of the 2 brackets I've made that secures the hamper to the rack, and we've got a little bit of brass piping, brass tubing there. We've got an old curtain rail holder where we've actually sawed a gap through it, a bit of a tea light, and then an old rolling pin sawn up that we had extra, and that sits in there nicely like so. And then we've got this little bracket which I've cut out of a bit of brass, and this is going to sit on the side of the hamper, and a couple of big washers to sort of act like a bearing really, I guess, and that sits on there like so.